Hey guys, welcome back. It's your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with another Kickstarter that's worth checking out. This one is by Compass Games. It is The War. Got to stop right there. The War. The Pacific 1941 to 1945. And this is kind of a sequel, add-on, expansion to The War in Europe. Not in Europe, but The War Europe. So I got that pulled up over here so we can see it. They're actually doing a reprint on this currently, so you can get it a little bit cheaper, and it is sold out, obviously. Just to show you the first one before we get into the second one, we can see the map here on the left, kind of zooming in a little bit when you guys see some of that. So this is the main theater there in Europe. And you guys know, if you've watched my channel, I love games like this. Big games where you can basically recreate all of World War II however you kind of want to, kind of get those what-if scenarios going on. So that's what this one can do, and they can be combined so you can play the whole war, both theaters, you know, Western, Eastern, Europe, Pacific, all together. I like how they have that going on. So here's some of the counters that are, now this isn't the Kickstarter we're talking about, although it can be kind of part of the Kickstarter. You'll see when I show the pledges. But these are the ones for the Europe version of the game. And I like how they don't have massive amounts of information on it. Because when you have a game of this size, you want it as simple to play as possible. So you can see the counters have a couple of numbers. Nothing too major to keep track of. It looks down here like the aircraft and the ships have 3 numbers. So probably some type of movement or defense factor or carrier factor. Now that's going to be a bigger thing going on in the Pacific. And let's see, a few more of the counters just so you can see what's going on in the Europe version. And they even have, like I said, the what ifs going on. What if America joined later, sooner? What if they got the bomb sooner? What if this happened, that happened? A lot of kind of play out the war the way you want to, up to 5 players controlling different nations. So let's pop over here to the actual Kickstarter, the Pacific version, which you guys know. Pacific, I freaking love. I love the Pacific Theater. It's full of Marines. So of course I'm going to love that. We're going to watch the video like we always do. I'm skipping the first minute and a half roughly because this is him basically explaining what the game is, and then he unboxes it, so I'm going to let you guys see from that point on.
So there's a ton of components in the War of the Pacific, so I won't show you everything, but I'll give you a brief overview of what's in the box. So we have 2 of these paper maps that cover the entirety of the Pacific Theater. The combined playing area is about 50 inches by 39 inches. So, pretty big playing area. We have 4 of these rule booklets.
Yeah, that's one thing Compass Games is definitely known for, is a lot of rule booklets. And I do like how they separate out the rules of play, the examples, the scenarios, into different booklets, so it's a little bit easier to find the information you're looking for. But the rules of play on this one is 120 pages. So it's not a light game, should we say, but judging by the counters, I would say that it's not overly complex, but with so many moving parts, especially in the Pacific, because everything has to be abstracted in the Pacific with so much carrier warfare going on. There's just going to have to be a fairly significant amount of rules for any game covering that aspect. Because if you don't have enough rules to it, I found that the games, they become too simplistic, too abstracted, and then you don't enjoy them as much. So I would rather err on the side of too much than too little, but there is a sweet spot there in the middle. We'll see if they have to hit that here.
One for the rules of play, it's about 120 pages. So pretty nice and thick rule booklet there. We have examples of play and designer notes book. These other 3 are pretty small compared to the rules of play. I have a scenarios book and a book of all the charts and tables. We also have 10 of these counter sheets.
That, by the way, is where I think the main cost of this game is coming from. The counters are the big cost when it comes to war games, and they have 10 sheets of counters. So that's the main cost for this game, and I think that's why they went with paper maps instead of mounted maps, because if they were mounted, it would have driven the cost up of this game fairly substantially. But you got to consider this is the entirety of the war, especially the war in the Pacific, 41 to 45. And then for the multitude of nations that are involved, and China is involved in this one. I believe you mentioned it in the video, like more involved than just abstractly like it usually is in most war games where there's some rules kind of covering China. This one, you can actually kind of get directly involved with China and everything that was going on in that section of the theater. So they've got to have the counters to cover all of that. The massive amount of counters for all the U.S. units, all the Japanese units, everyone else, the Australian units that are involved. So there's a fairly substantial, and that's not even considering all the informational counters that go along with it as well.
Pretty nice artwork and a lot of different colors on these. Pretty thick counters, give you an idea of how thick those are. So combined, there's going to be about 1,650 pieces out of these counter sheets. There's 2 dice in this game as well, and then we have 106 playing cards that cover a bunch of different categories. For instance, counter-espionage, intelligence points, strategic air command, espionage, and submarine and anti-submarine warfare.
Now, speaking of the cards, something that they did mention, I think it was in the little blurb here on Europe, the European theater, is the fact that it's not a CDG. It's not a card-driven game per se. Yeah, see right here, the not a card-driven game, and thus a good candidate for solitaire play. So when you want to play solitaire, like that's the way I play these games, it's going to work for that. Now, of course, this one doesn't have like a built-in AI or anything. You're hot seating it, but I mean that's what I do all the time anyway. So I think it's going to work fine for it. So understand that when he's talking about the cards there. Let's bring it back up.
And there's also about 35 pages of displays and player aid cards. And I'll give you an example of what some of those look like.
All right, so this is the whole map. So you guys can kind of see what it's going to look like. And everyone has to understand when it comes to the Pacific, they have to abstract this distance with the oceans because it's such a vast amount of territory that if you put it in a realistic scope, you would have just these like multiple huge just blue maps with tiny little dots of 1 hex islands here and there. So all this is abstracted space, but I mean it's specific. It's what you're going to get over it, and this is the area that we're concerned with. Island hopping campaign. The Australians coming up, doing their little thing. The Japanese coming down, doing their little thing, and this, as it's scrolling through, is just showing the extra player aids that come with the game. Oh, okay, here we go. Sequence of play. Income. Both players receive their NARF income. I have no idea what NARF stands for. That's awesome. Both players purchase RLEs prior to the start of the scenario. Japanese players operations. Skip all units that are in supply. Build or dismantle, rebuild air bases. Phasing player organizes or reorganizes his naval units into task forces. If he fails to do so, 2 naval units equals 1 task force equivalent rounded up. Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense because ships didn't just sail off on their own. You didn't have, for the most part, an aircraft carrier just out there by itself. It had cruisers, it had battleships, hopefully. It had destroyer escorts, all that type stuff. So those rules are in the game. Units embark on sea transport. So all this type stuff that we've seen before, sea transport, landing invasions, all that's going to be a big part of the game. I mean, with it being in the in the Pacific. Non-phasing player announces interception attempts and roles for them. Naval units first, then air units. I like it that they've got that in there because also a big thing. Think, Battle of Midway. Were they able to intercept them or not? Were they able to find the enemy task force? Now they do say that there isn't like hidden information, so it's going to solitaire well. So it's not one of those types of games where you're not going to know where the units are. So that's where they're going to have something like rolling to attempt to intercept. Phasing player conducts any naval and or naval air battles in any sea areas in which he has been intercepted. Naval units which have carried out their missions remain in the destination sea area until the end of the turn. That makes me wonder what happens at the end of the turn. Do they move back to harbors, maybe? Phasing player moves any naval units carrying invading forces, which have survived interception and naval battles, to beach hexes or ports for amphibious assault. Cool. Very awesome. That's what Marines do. Phasing player conducts first impulse ground unit movement. OAS may assist. DAS may intercept. No idea. Phasing player carries out first impulse. OAS. Defender announces and moves any air units performing. All right, we're not going to keep reading through all this. You guys can read through it on your own. Let's see if they have any other player aids. I think there's one or two more pictures in this. Nope, that was it. All right, so let's scroll through and show the rest of the Kickstarter itself. Little blurb about it, what you're going to get in it, the 2 map sheets, the 10 sheets of counters, a little bit bigger than half-inch. They're the 5/8, 120-page rulebook, which is going to be a pain to read. The rulebook, the size isn't necessarily the big thing for it. For me, it's when I look at it, does it look like a college textbook? And I'm sitting there like, oh, I got to drag through this. It's a hard concept to really get across, but it's just the way that it's written. I think a little bit larger text helps, especially with me because my eyesight seems to be starting to give in my older years. A little bit bigger text, some pictures for good examples, stuff like that. Because if you're just opening it and it's just column after column of tight, small text, it really just wears on you. You almost feel tired after reading it. So as long as they understand that in the rule book, which Compass Games is usually pretty good. Their rule books are not usually dregs to go through. 35 full color displays, player aids. That's a lot. 40 page booklets of scenarios, 32 page examples, 40 page booklet charts, tables, and worksheets. 106 playing cards. And I think the playing cards, like I was saying again, have more to do with potential random events. And then 2 dice. I'm wondering if the 2 dice are D6 or D10. My guess is going to be D6. That's the usual ones they go with. Now this I like. They've got it here. Complexity, high. 8 out of 10. Because there's a lot going on here. I like it when the companies are honest about it. This isn't one that possibly needs to be your first war game. When I first got into war games, I had no idea what I was looking for and didn't understand to look at complexity. And that's why I started out looking at that huge World War II game by GMT Games. Damn, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I thought it was so awesome. Like, oh, it takes 6 months to learn. That just sounds awesome. No, no, it's not. You need to start with something a little bit easier. Number of players, 2 to 4. Good suitability for solitaire play. 1 to 30 plus hour scenario. So that's obviously going to be if you're playing a small scenario versus the entire damn war. 14 plus, roughly 100 miles per hex. And unit scale, fleets, task forces, divisions, corps, armies, all that good stuff. What you would expect in a strategic level game. They have this annotated very largely here, which is again why I went ahead and pulled up the first one. The fact that it can be played together to have the global version of the game. Really like that. And let's look at the pledge levels. Have the usual pledge without a reward. Now this is the base level, 125 for the game, MSRP 165, and it's anticipated delivery of July 2021. I don't know that they're going to meet that one. I'm probably going to be guessing more like October, because no one ever meets their estimated delivery. It just never happens. Everything gets delayed somewhere in the world. It just happens. And this has nothing to do with Compass Games. Every Kickstarter out there is always late. I just don't understand why they don't add more time to it. Like, no, let's estimate December. That way, when they get it in October, they're going to be thrilled. This, I think, is a really awesome way to do it. They have the War Global Pack, both of the games. So roughly 120 per game is what you're paying there. For the 240 for the both. If I had it, I would be backing at this level in a heartbeat. Mother's Day, I took care of the wife. Was not able to do this, so that's very unfortunate for me. But I'll have to pick it up at retail later and just pay a little bit more. But this one, if you can and you're interested in doing the whole war, definitely not a bad deal to get it at this rate. Because I did pull it up on Amazon just to show you guys. If you're trying to pick up the war now, buying options are not good. Like here, it's 125, but it's a used game. So you're not going to be getting a brand new version of it. Might be some other places you could find it. BGG. Oh, and there's an expansion pack kit for it as well. Oh, World at War. That's the one I was trying to think of. That was the first one I was going to start with. So yeah, finding the first version of it right now is a little more difficult. So this kind of guarantees you that if you want to go this route, or if you just want Europe, you could go this route as well, just depending on which way you want to go. And then you could do a 2-pack of the War in the Pacific. I guess if you have a friend you want to give one to. And then the War full franchise, if you want the whole thing, whole kit and caboodle, which is the Pacific Kickstarter they're doing now, the War in Europe reprint, and then the War Europe expansion kit. So you get the whole kit and caboodle with this one. That's the 300. So you're paying $60 for the expansion kit, which isn't too bad. And then there's not a whole lot of extra information. I like they don't have, every superfluous thing listed down on their Kickstarters. It explains here the number of players, who's controlling what, basically Axis and allies if it's 2 players, obviously, and then if you're doing 3, 4, 5, 6 players, whoever is controlling what is listed down here. Here's the first map again, showing Japan, China, Australia, all the islands there in between them that you can fight over, and then one large one full of sea, which is to be expected. And then again, some more examples of the counters that come with the game. Man, that would be so cool having all the ships out on the board. Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this in action. Of course, a lot of Japanese ships, a lot of Japanese planes. Looks like a few German things going on over here. I'm not sure what that is. A lot of American stuff, again, to be expected. And this looks like informational counters down here. And then some pictures, and check out the full rules here. Definitely, I would recommend doing this. And this is something that I like when a Kickstarter does, because I think that gives you a good estimate of whether or not you're going to be into the game. If you can read through the rules, eyeball it, it'll give you at least an idea of how the game's going to play. You know what you like better than I do. You know what you're into. You know if it's too deep for you, or if it's not deep enough, or if it's just right. Read the rules. Take a few minutes before you pull that trigger. And if it sounds like something you're going to be really into, bam, then you need to pull the trigger and get whatever pack works for you. And then bam. I'm not sure how they're handling. Here we go. Not EU friendly. So if you are in the European Union, not sure how the whole tax thing, the VAT thing works for you guys. Sorry, I just don't know as much about that. It does say it's not EU friendly, so just be aware is all I can warn you guys as far as that's concerned. If that's something that's going to affect you, I hope it doesn't. But if it does, just so you know. All right, so that's it. That's the war. God, I keep wanting to just say it, the War in the Pacific, but there is a game, the War in the Pacific. So this is the War, the Pacific, 1941, 1945. Compass Games, they do good work, and supposedly it should be out relatively soon. So if you're interested in the Pacific Theater, or the entirety of World War II. Definitely one to check out. Looks like it's streamlined enough that once you've got a good grasp of the rules between the player aids, you should be all right to just get to the board. The counters are not so information intensive as to be cumbersome. You know, a couple of numbers to keep track of, nothing too weighty, but enough to really give you a good gaming experience. All right, anyway, that's going to be it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Definitely check it out if you haven't already and pick up whichever one you're interested in. All right, y'all take care. I'll see you in the next one.